Hey, what's up guys? Brandon Bass here, and today I'm going to talk about 3 pre-contest myths that have been debunked, and I'm going to talk to you guys about why they've been debunked and why you don't need to apply these principles anymore when you're competing or getting ready for a contest. I've been competing for the past 10 years. I just recently did a show about 3 weeks ago, and I pretty much brought the best package I've ever brought. I'll be throwing up some pictures kind of sporadically throughout this video, but I really kind of didn't follow any of the bro science type mentalities of you have to eat certain foods, you have to train this way, you have to peak a certain way the week of, and I think it really helped. You know, I've been competing over 10 years now, and I used to follow some of those old school kind of bro science principles, and it never really worked out that well for me. I always, ended up looking better. I mean, how many times have people said, oh, I look better, 2 days after my competition. They didn't peak at the right time, and I'll get into reasons why that usually exists. But yeah, these myths right here that I'm about to talk to you guys about, you don't have to follow. If you guys are kind of lost in terms of contest prep, I highly recommend hiring a coach and somebody who's been in the trenches and knows what it's like, as opposed to people that just have never competed themselves and just kind of tell you guys how to do it. I think you have to experience it, go through the process, have those hunger pains, and really actually feel what a contest prep feels like to have that experience, and you can bring that to a potential client. All right, so first myth that I'm going to debunk is that you have to eat certain foods and you have to avoid things like dairy, things like even protein bars, anything that has sugar in it. That is completely false. I follow this entire diet. Even the 2 weeks before, up until the week of, I was eating the cake bites that Optimum Nutrition makes, which would always be off limits, if I were to follow the old school principles. I drank milk, I ate yogurt, I had cottage cheese, I even ate like string cheese, the low fat. Now, what you have to do when you're preparing for a competition, you have to be incredibly stringent with how much of everything that you're eating. So you have to weigh your food, you have to make sure that everything is documented in the form of an app like MyFitnessPal or My Macros. I prefer MyFitnessPal. It's just an easier system for me. But you have to weigh your food to know exactly what you're putting into your body, and then plug it into the app to make sure that you're calculating things correctly. And then every week, take a picture or take a video of yourself, see what it looks like, and then you can kind of see if there's any changes, and if you see that you need to maybe cut your carbs or cut your fat a little bit. I wouldn't make any drastic cuts week by week. I would definitely, start much sooner out from a show than what you're used to. The 12-week diet, maybe not so great. I would maybe start 16 weeks out. This way you're ready a little early, so you don't have to kind of like panic the last 2 weeks or the last week, and you don't have to throw in some kind of crazy, oh, I'm going to cut my carbs to nothing, I'm going to cut my water, I'm going to cut this. Make sure that you're ready early, and make sure that you don't, limit yourself and restrict yourself in terms of the foods that you like. Obviously, you don't want to waste your calories on cookies and donuts and pizza. I mean, you could eat that and still get lean, but at the same time, you're not going to be full. You're not going to, a lot of your calories, a lot of your fat and carbs are going to be pretty much tapped out by, 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Then what are you going to do for the rest of the day? So, I think you should focus on more high volume foods that are going to keep you satiated, keep you full, but you don't have to limit yourself, guys. You can eat pretty much whatever you want within the range of the calories that you're going after, and there are nutrition calculators. You can figure out where you need to be, and then get a starting point. If you don't want to start 16 weeks out, start 20 weeks out and make it a slower prep. I mean, obviously, the longer the prep, the more muscle you're going to retain, and the earlier you're going to probably be ready for the competition. So don't think that just because you eat tilapia and broccoli, it has some magical effects on your skin. It doesn't. You can eat pretty much whatever you want. You can have dairy. You can have. I mean, dairy is a great source of protein. I mean, I do there's a company out there called Fairlife, which has like half the sugar of regular milk, and it has a little bit more protein. So I opt for that option, where it's a little bit easier for me to consume milk, which I enjoy drinking. And you can still kind of lower the sugar a little bit. So just little things like that. You can find healthier options of things that you like, and because you're looking to kind of cut the calories. But yeah, no food options are pretty much off the table. Now, number 2 is your training. Now, when I first started, it was all about, oh, you gotta train high rep, you gotta lower the weight and burn out the muscle to bring out the definition. That's completely false. What you got to do is, in terms of definition in your muscle, that comes down to a lower body fat percentage. That's all that is. And you have to have the muscle mass there to show it off when you have a low body fat. You can't just define a muscle through high repetition. I mean, that just doesn't work that way. Your muscle either gets bigger or gets smaller. And you're going to have a more potential to gain muscle mass by training heavier with compound movements. Yeah, you can throw in things like drop sets and rest pause sets. I think that's good, but I think that you should focus on training heavy, and that's relative. I think you should probably train within the 6 to 10, 6 to 12 range. And then every now and then you can throw in a high rep set, maybe to 15, but I wouldn't go any higher than that, and I definitely wouldn't think that you're going to burn any more calories or, expend more energy and get more cut doing that. It's just not going to work out that way. Now, one thing I will say about training heavy and training with compound movements, for anybody who's gone through a contest prep probably knows this, that the last, I would say 2 or 3 weeks, it is extremely difficult to get under the squat rack. It's extremely difficult to deadlift and to do the heavier lifts. And at the same time, I mean, your body's at a very vulnerable state. You're low calorie, you're cutting your carbs a little bit, your fat's a little bit lower than it usually is, and obviously your body weight is much lower. So I would say, do the compound lifts and do the heavy stuff up until maybe 2 weeks out. And then what I found myself doing with this last prep was I was doing a lot of hammer strength machines, doing a lot of cables, isolation, just because, not because it's going to bring out the cuts or the definition, but because I didn't want to injure myself. And at that point, when you're that low calories, you're not putting on any muscle or size. So it really doesn't make a huge difference, but it does make a difference 14 weeks out, 12 weeks out, 10 weeks out, 8 weeks out. If you're just going to do purely isolation movements, you're going to just dwindle away to nothing. So you have to keep the heavy lifts in, you got to keep the compound movements in, and it's pretty simple, guys. You look at your weight training for one purpose, building muscle. You look at your diet and your cardio to burn the body fat. If you look at it from that approach, your training really won't be altered much during a muscle gaining phase or a cutting phase or a deficit. So always have the goal in mind of I'm trying to put on size. Even if my diet is a little bit lower in calories and I'm doing cardio and I'm trying to get cut, always look at your weight training like I'm trying to stimulate the muscle as much as I can. So that way you'll always kind of go into the gym with that goal in mind, as opposed to, oh, I'm gonna burn a bunch of body fat with this weight training session, which, yeah, of course it does. The epoch effect, of course, is true, and you're going to boost your metabolism and burn calories days after your workout. But look at the weight training as a muscle building activity, not necessarily a fat loss activity. Focus on the diet and cutting calories where you can, and being in a deficit as a way to burn the body fat. Okay, so that's myth number 2. Now, myth number 3, peak week. Now, everybody kind of knows and has probably heard, if you've ever done a competition or know friends who have done a competition, that do crazy, outlandish things the last week or the week leading up to the show. They'll cut their sodium, they cut their water, even sometimes they'll potassium load, which is extremely dangerous and pretty crazy to me. I've never done that personally, but I have cut massive amounts of water and just kind of cut it to sipping and cut the sodium. And then what happens is you end up carb loading, but you don't drink a lot of water and you don't eat a lot of sodium. I mean, sodium and water are essential for pumps. So you have to have that in your body if you expect to look your best on stage. I mean, what's the pump up process for? You don't have to restrict sodium. You don't have to restrict water the week leading up. I would advise you to try to be ready a week out. In terms of your conditioning, be like, all right, I could step on stage tomorrow and be ready to compete. Do that a week before the competition. And then you can just kind of coast into the show. You don't have to do anything drastic. You don't have to do anything crazy. Most guys who look great a week out, if they don't do anything crazy, are going to look great, the day of the show. Most people who look like shit the week before the competition, just because they do some crazy carb loading and water restriction and sodium restriction, they never look any better, come Saturday or come show day. So you don't have to do that stuff. And like I said before in this video, I mean, how many times have people looked better on Sunday or Monday when the show was Saturday because they ate a cheeseburger and they ate fries and they drank a bunch of water, and all of a sudden they're vascular, they're full, they could get a pump. So I advise you to do that kind of stuff maybe the Friday night or Thursday night before the competition. It's not going to make a difference. You're not going to spill over. I mean, obviously you want to do it within reason and have a coach that knows what he's doing, but you definitely don't want to avoid sodium and actively avoid it. I mean, you want to have it because without that, you're not going to get the pumps. All right, guys, there's 3 myths that I talked about. I'm going to throw up some pictures. I probably will have had some up during the video, and then I'll throw some in at the very end. But yeah, I mean, I think that this was probably the best I've looked in a competition, and I didn't follow, you know, I ate what I wanted pretty much, I mean, within reason, but I was always under my calorie intake, always at a deficit. I always trained pretty heavy, always trained with compound movements up until about two weeks out, and then I started lightening the load, going more isolation, and just kind of like, you know, at that point your body fat's extremely low. You're just trying to kind of burn as many calories as possible. And then of course for peak week, I didn't cut sodium, I didn't cut water. I mean, I just pretty much did things that you know, I felt was necessary, and I looked my best. But guys, hit me up in the comment sections if you have any questions. My email will be below. Email me anytime you need anything answered, or have any questions you guys want me to make a video about, or if you have any just in general questions about training, nutrition, or supplementation, let me know. And I'll see you next time.